The bells were already ringing when she ran. Not for prayer, not for joy, for her. Clara Whitmore's wedding day had begun before sunrise, and by the time the second toll echoed across the valley, she was halfway across a frozen pasture, with mud climbing her skirts and breath tearing from her throat. If you have ever stood one step away from a life you did not choose, you know the sound those bells make. They do not call you forward, they chase you. Her boots slipped frost-stiff grass. Cold air cut her lungs. Behind her, the white farmhouse stood quiet, windows glowing soft gold. Inside, her father would already be sitting at the table, pipe smoke rising, saying nothing. He had not said much for weeks. Only numbers, only debts, only the name of the man who would clear them. Elias Boone, largest cattle spread in the valley. 47 years old, never married, strong hands, strong temper. Clara did not look back again. She cut toward the timber line instead of the road. The road belonged to wagons, to men, to ownership. The trees swallowed her. Pine needles muffled her steps. Sap stuck to her palms when she grabbed trunks to steady herself. The lace ribbon that had been tied in her hair snagged on a low branch. It ripped free. She kept moving. Behind her, distant shouts cracked the air. Horses, they had noticed. She pushed harder uphill, skirts catching on thorn brush, tearing along the hem. Her ankle rolled once. Pain shot up her leg. She did not slow. The mountains rose sharp and gray against a pale sky. They looked cruel. They looked honest. Snow lay deeper as she climbed. Her breathing turned ragged. Her hands burned where bark had scraped skin. A bell tolled again in the valley below. The third strike. She stumbled against a fallen log and crouched there, chest heaving. For a moment's silence, only wind, only the faint groan of branches shifting, then a new sound, metal snapping close. She froze. Her hand rested inches from iron jaws, half buried beneath leaves. A trap, heavy steel teeth ready to shatter bone. She pulled back slowly, too slowly. A shadow moved across the snow. She looked up. He stood between her and the trees beyond, tall, broad shoulders wrapped in buffalo hide. Beard dark, streaked with winter gray. A rifle resting easy in his hand, barrel pointed toward the ground but steady. His eyes were the pale blue of glacial ice. He did not speak. He only watched. Clara tried to stand. Her ankle buckled. She caught herself on both palms, breath hissing through her teeth. Below, hoofbeats grew louder, voices calling her name. The man glanced down the slope, then back at her, his jaw tightened once. "Can you walk?" he asked. His voice was low, rough as stone dragged over stone. She shook her head. He stepped forward without hesitation. He lifted her, as if she weighed nothing. One arm beneath her knees, one against her back. She felt the solid strength in his chest, the smell of smoke and leather in his coat. He did not climb higher. He moved sideways, along a narrow shelf of rock where horses would not follow. Snow began to fall. At first thin, then heavier, wind pushed through the trees in rising waves. Clara pressed her face against his shoulder, fighting the tremor in her body. "Why?" she whispered. He did not answer. He moved with purpose, stepping across frozen stones, crossing a shallow creek to break any trail. The cabin appeared suddenly from behind thick spruce, half built into the mountain itself. Logs thick as fence posts, roof low and squat, no windows, only one heavy door. He kicked it open and carried her inside. Warmth struck her skin. Firelight flickered across stone walls. He set her on a rough bunk and barred the door with a timber beam. Outside, the wind began to howl in earnest. The storm had arrived. He knelt and pulled off her boot. His hands were scarred, knuckles thick. He pressed along her swollen ankle carefully. "Sprain," he muttered. He stood, returned with cloth and salve that smelled sharp and clean. As he wrapped her ankle, the first thunder of hooves reached the clearing outside. Clara's breath stopped. A voice shouted faintly through the storm. "She came this way." The man rose and extinguished the lantern. Darkness swallowed the room except for the low glow of coals. He moved close. His palm covered her mouth, firm but not cruel. They waited. Boots crunched in snow outside. A rider cursed at the wind. Another voice said she would freeze before sunset. The sound drifted away. Snow thickened. Silence returned. He lowered his hand. "They won't stay," he said quietly. "Men like that don't freeze for someone else's bride." Clara swallowed. "I'm not someone's bride." He looked at her. Long, measured. "What are you, then?" She held his gaze despite the shaking in her limbs. "I'm a runaway bride." The wind slammed against the cabin walls. He leaned back slowly, studying her torn dress, the missing ribbon, the bruise half hidden near her collar. Then for the first time, the corner of his mouth shifted. Not mocking, not cruel, a decision forming. "If you're running," he said, voice steady as bedrock, "run straight to me instead." The storm roared louder. Snow buried the valley, and for the first time since dawn, Clara did not feel chased. She felt chosen. Outside, somewhere beyond the timber, a single gunshot cracked through the blizzard. He turned his head toward the sound, then he reached for his rifle. The gunshot did not echo. It cracked once, sharp, close. Caleb moved before the sound finished breaking apart in the wind. He stepped to the door and lifted the bar just enough to peer through a narrow slit in the timber. Snow whipped sideways across the clearing. White blinding, another shot. Closer now. Clara pushed herself upright on the bunk, despite the pain burning through her ankle. "Are they coming?" she asked. Caleb did not answer immediately. He watched, listening to things she could not hear. Boots grinding under snow, the shift of weight on frozen ground. "They're spreading out," he said at last. "Trying to flush me." He did not say us. He did not look at her. He grabbed his rifle and checked the chamber with calm fingers. Clara felt something shift inside her chest. Not panic, something sharper. "If they find you," she whispered, "they'll say you stole me." Caleb's jaw tightened. "They can say what they like. They'll hang you for it." His eyes cut toward her, blue, cold. "They'll try." Outside, a rider shouted again. Another voice answered from deeper in the timber. They were close. The storm might hide tracks, but it would not hide smoke. Caleb crossed to the hearth and smothered the flames with a heavy iron lid. The cabin dimmed to shadow. Only the glow of coals remained. He turned to her. "Can you move if I carry you?" Clara nodded. She forced her injured foot to the floor. White pain burst up her leg. She did not cry out. He stepped to her without another word, lifted her again. Efficient, strong, he moved to the back wall. For a moment she thought there was nothing there but stone. Then he kicked aside a stack of split wood. Behind it, a narrow crawl space, black, low, cold air breathing from inside. He crouched, set her down just inside the dark. "Stay quiet," he said. "What about you?" His mouth curved slightly. "They're not hunting you." He stepped back and pulled the wood into place. Darkness swallowed her. Clara lay flat against frozen earth, breathing shallow, listening. Boots pounded outside. The door rattled once. Then again. A fist struck timber. "Open up!" someone shouted. The bar lifted. The door creaked inward. Wind howled through the opening. She heard heavy steps cross the floor. A stranger's voice. "Rough." "Caleb Reed," the man called. "We know you're here." So that was his name, Reed. Silence answered. Then another voice. "You're hiding stolen property, mountain man." Boots scraped. A chair overturned. Wood cracked. They were searching. Clara pressed her palm against her mouth to steady her breath. Her heart thudded so loud she feared it would give her away. "Check the back," someone ordered. Steps approached the wall, the woodpile. A boot nudged a log. Clara's throat tightened then. A sudden crash outside. Horses screaming. Men shouting. "What the?" A gunshot exploded right outside the cabin. Then another. Chaos. Boots rushed toward the door. The men cursed and bolted outside. The door slammed. Wind roared again. Silence crept back slowly. After several long moments, the woods shifted. Light cut through darkness. Caleb's face appeared, snow dusted in his beard, breath steaming. "They're gone," he said. She crawled out carefully. "What happened?" He moved to the window slit. "Storm spooked their horses." He paused. "No." His eyes narrowed. "Something else did." Another shot cracked in the distance. Not from the riders, from higher up the ridge. Caleb's head turned sharply. "Someone's out there," he murmured. Clara's stomach tightened. "You're not alone on this mountain." He looked at her then, truly looked. "You shouldn't be here." "I know." The wind slammed the cabin again. Snow piled against the door. The world outside was disappearing. He studied her face, the torn dress, the bruise along her collar. "You could gone east," he said. "Back to town." "They would have chained me to a man twice my age," she answered quietly. He did not argue. The storm grew heavier. By nightfall, the clearing vanished completely. Snow sealed the door halfway up. The world narrowed to one room, one fire, one man, one runaway bride. Caleb rebuilt the fire. Orange light filled the cabin again. He handed her dried venison and a tin cup of melted snow. She ate slowly, hands trembling from cold and leftover fear. After a long silence, she spoke. "My father said Elias Boone would keep me warm, said I'd never worry about food." Caleb stared into the flames. "Warmth ain't the same as mercy." Her fingers tightened around the cup. "He grabbed me 3 days ago, just to see if I'd pull away." The fire cracked sharply. Caleb's hand went still on the poker. "He laughed," she added. The cabin felt smaller suddenly. Tighter, the air heavier. Caleb stood abruptly. He crossed to the door and pressed his palm against the timber, as if measuring something beyond it. "If they come back," he said quietly, "they won't leave this ridge." Clara watched his back, broad, scarred through the fabric. "You don't even know me," she said. He turned slowly. Silence settled between them. Not empty waited. The storm roared on. Snow thickened. No one would reach this cabin until morning. Maybe not even then. Caleb pulled a second buffalo robe from a chest and placed it near her bunk. He did not touch her again. He lay down on the far side of the fire, rifle within reach. They faced opposite walls. Wind shook the roof. Sometime in the night, Clara woke. The storm had softened. Only distant wind now, and another sound. Footsteps. Not outside, inside. She sat up slowly. Caleb was not on his pallet. The door was slightly open. Snow drifted in across the threshold. Her pulse jumped. She reached for the nearest object, a small iron skillet. Then she heard his voice, low, outside, speaking to someone. Another voice answered, deeper, older. She sloughed off the bunk and limped to the doorway. Cold hit her face immediately. Moonlight reflected off endless white. 20 yards from the cabin stood Caleb, rifle lowered facing a second man. Taller, wrapped in a long dark coat, hat brim shadowing his face. They were not arguing. They were measuring each other. The stranger glanced toward the cabin. His eyes found her and held. Then he smiled, slow, deliberate. "Looks like you finally picked a side," the stranger said to Caleb. Caleb's jaw hardened. She ran to me. The stranger's gaze moved back to Clara. "Then he just made himself your enemy," he said calmly. Snow drifted between them. The wind stilled completely. The stranger tipped his hat once. "Boone's riding at dawn," he said, "with 20 men. Then he turned and disappeared into the trees. Clara stood frozen in the doorway. Caleb did not move for a long moment. When he finally turned back toward her, the calm in his eyes was gone. "We've got till sunrise," he said. And in the valley below, faint but unmistakable, horses, many of them, moving through the night. The horses did not slow. They thundered through the timber below the ridge, like a storm with hooves. Caleb stepped back inside and barred the door. No rush now, no wasted movement. He looked at Clara once, not asking permission, not offering comfort. just measuring the seconds left. "Can you ride?" he asked. "Yes." "Can you shoot?" She held his gaze. "If I have to." He nodded once. "Good enough." He crossed to a chest near the hearth and pulled out a second rifle. Older, well used. He checked the chamber. Loaded. He handed it to her without ceremony. The weight surprised her. Cold metal against her palm. "This cabin won't hold 20 men," he said. "So we don't stay." He shook his head. "They'll cut us down in open snow." Outside, the first of Boone's riders reached the clearing. A lantern glow flickered through the storm. Clara's breath shortened. "You know them," she whispered. Caleb's jaw worked. "Boone owns half the valley. Other half owes him." A fist slammed against the door. "Caleb Reed," a voice boomed. "You step out now and we leave the girl unharmed." Clara's stomach dropped, unharmed. Like she was cattle to be transferred. Caleb did not respond. Another blow struck the door. Wood groaned. A third. The bar splintered at one end. Caleb moved fast. He shoved the woodpile aside again. The crawl space. "Get inside." "No." His eyes snapped to hers. "You don't argue now." She stepped closer instead. "If they burn it." "They won't." "How do you know?" He looked toward the door. "Because Boone wants you breathing." The door cracked inward. A rifle barrel forced through the gap. Caleb fired first. The shot exploded inside the small room. The barrel jerked back. A man screamed outside. Chaos erupted instantly. Gunfire tore through the walls. Wood splinters sprayed across the floor. Caleb shoved Clara toward the back wall and dropped behind the table. Smoke filled the air. "Stay low," he barked. Another bullet punched through the door and struck the hearthstones. Caleb fired again through the crack. Another scream. But there were too many of them. Boots pounded around the cabin. One rider circled behind. Clara saw it through the narrow slit. A shadow moving toward the back. "They're splitting." Caleb rolled across the floor and kicked open a trapdoor near the hearth. Clara stared. There had been no sign of it before. A tunnel, rough cut, angling downward into rock. "Go," he ordered. She dropped inside without hesitation. Cold air rushed past her. She slid down a dirt slope and landed hard on her palms. Above her, Caleb fired twice more. Then Boots crashed through the door, shouting, wood breaking. Then he dropped into the tunnel and slammed the hatch closed behind him. Darkness swallowed them. Heavy pounding sounded overhead. Men overturning furniture, cursing. Caleb grabbed her hand. "Run!" The tunnel angled downward sharply. Dirt walls brushing her shoulders. The ceiling low. She stumbled once. He caught her and kept moving. Behind them, muffled voices. Then silence. They reached the end of the tunnel. A narrow opening concealed by brush. Caleb pushed through. They emerged halfway down the ridge behind a rock face. Snow still falling. The clearing above hidden by trees. The riders had not seen the escape. Yet Caleb did not pause. He led her across frozen rock, down toward the narrow ravine below. Hooves thundered again overhead. "They'll see tracks," Clara shouted over the wind. Caleb pulled her toward the creek bed. Water ran shallow beneath ice. He stepped into it without hesitation. Cold surged around his boots. He motioned for her to follow. She did. The shock stole her breath. They moved downstream. Boots grinding over stone, water masking their scent. After 50 yards, he hauled her up the opposite bank and into thicker timber. Behind them, shouting resumed. "They're gone! Spread out!" Gunshots cracked blindly through trees. One bullet struck bark inches from Clara's head. She flinched but kept moving. The timber thinned ahead. Open ridge beyond. Bad ground for horses. Steep. Rocky. Caleb pushed harder, his breath heavy. Now they crested the ridge, just as the first riders burst from the trees below. Boone's himself rode at the front. Broad, gray beard. Rifle across his saddle. He spotted them instantly. "Clara!" he shouted. She froze. That voice. Not cruel, not violent. Just entitled. "Come down," Boone called. "You're cold, you're scared." I can fix this. Caleb stepped in front of her. Boone's gaze shifted to him. You've been living like an animal too long, Reed, Boone said calmly. Hand her over and I'll let you walk. Caleb did not raise his rifle yet. Clara stepped around him. No. Her voice carried across the ridge. Boone frowned. You don't know what you're choosing? I do. Wind ripped across the open ground. Boone lifted his rifle slowly. Caleb moved at the same time. Both guns fired. The crack split the mountain air. Boone jerked backward in his saddle. The bullet had torn through his shoulder. He stayed upright, but fury replaced calm. Take him! Boone roared. The riders charged uphill. Horses slipping on rock. Caleb grabbed Clara's hand. They ran along the ridge instead of down it. The ground narrowed. A sheer drop on one side. Cliff on the other. A single-file path. Horses could not follow fast. Caleb stopped suddenly, turned, kneeled, fired once. Screamed and reared, throwing its rider. The path clogged instantly. Men cursed. Another shot from below. A bullet tore through Caleb's sleeve. Blood darkened his arm. Clara grabbed the fallen rifle of the thrown rider. She steadied it against a rock. Fired once. The sound shocked her own ears. A rider's hat flew off as he ducked. Caleb glanced at her. Just once. Approval. They moved again. The ridge bent sharply ahead, beyond it open sky. And nothing the path ended at a ravine. 20 feet across, 30 feet down, ice-coated rock walls. Caleb looked at the gap, then at her. Behind them, the riders untangled. Clara Boone shouted hoarsely, clutching his shoulder. Don't be foolish. Caleb's hand found hers. Trust me. He stepped back, counted the distance. Snow swirled between them and the gap. Run when I do. Boots pounded behind, Boone's men nearly upon them. Caleb squeezed her fingers. Now they ran. 3 strides. 4. The edge rushed toward them. Clara's stomach dropped. Then Caleb jumped. For a heartbeat, there was only air. Wind tearing at her hair. Snow blinding her vision, then impact. Hard. Rough hands catching her arm. They slammed into the opposite side. Rolled. Snow cushioning part of the fall. Pain burst through her ribs. But they were across. The riders pulled their horses up hard at the ravine edge. Too wide for a jump. Too steep for a descent. Boone stared across the gap at them. Snow swirling around his figure. You'll freeze before nightfall, he shouted. Cal pulled Clara to her feet, wrapped his bleeding arm tighter with cloth. We won't, Boone's men argued behind him. No safe way across. No clear trail. Boone looked at Clara one last time, the entitlement in his eyes cracking. Then he turned his horse. The riders followed. The storm swallowed them. Silence returned slowly. Caleb stood breathing hard, blood dripping from his sleeve into snow. Clara stepped closer. You're hit. It's nothing. She reached up anyway, pressed her hand over the wound. He didn't pull away. The wind softened. Snow fell lighter now. The mountain beyond the ravine stretched wide and empty. No fences, no bells, no debts. Caleb looked at her. You still running? She shook her head. I'm staying. He nodded once. Then he took her hand again. Not dragging, not leading, just holding. They turned away from the ravine and walked deeper into the white.